Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Good. Today, before we start the podcast, we need to start listing the 17 people we are presented by, because we're talking name, image, or likeness, and I think we all know both of our images and names worth quite a bit of money.
Yes, I'm excited to sign all of our deals. For college, however, they will not be able to start signing those deals until the 2021-2022 academic year. Rules need to be in place in January-ish, according to the board that came down this week and has basically decided, we're going to recommend approval of the name, image, and likeness for the college athletes. So then for the 2021 football season, Tom, when we say, talk to Garrett Wilson after the game, Garrett, tell us about that touchdown. And then he'll be like, well, like my guys at Tommy's Pizza say, you just got to want it more, and I want it more, and I want more Tommy's. And so that's, I know there's a lot of concerns about how this is going to destroy college football and college athletics. And we've talked many times before, including about this subject when Gene Smith discussed it with us back in October, that we don't foresee this destroying anything. It's probably going to change some things for sure. Going to make lives a lot easier for some athletes. But even the example I just gave you with Garrett Wilson, like, there may be some of that, but you don't really see that in professional sports. So, this is a professionalization in this aspect of college athletics. So it's okay to think, well, what happens in professional sports? Well, when you're talking to somebody after a game, they're not pitching a product. So don't expect that to happen here. And Tom, the post-game atmosphere is a crazy thing anyway. So really there's not a lot of room to set up for your presentation, and not necessarily something you're thinking about, but still, it's a big day for college athletes, even though they're going to have to wait a while before they get to experience it. But, big news.
Yeah, there are still a lot of details that need to be ironed out. And, I think I saw a lot of people saying, oh, good for the NCAA for doing this. It's like, well, they haven't actually done anything yet. They've just sort of acknowledged that this is an issue and everyone knows it's an issue. And they're only acknowledging that it's an issue because they were going to, they were either going to have to deal with lawsuits or legislative action from various states that was going to force their hand. So this is the only way the NCAA moves on any of this stuff, which we'll get to the single funniest Mark Emmert quote in the history of the world, probably sometime later in the podcast. But I don't think that you're going to have, Kyle McCord standing at the podium 2 years from now and just wanting to talk about Elk and Elk law firm. You think about the way professional interviews go. It's, plenty of players conduct plenty of interviews after games and they're just talking about the games. And then when they do these media tours, that's when they have to, they'll talk about a sponsor. And, I heard Tua Tagovailoa on a podcast at some point in the last week, and I don't remember what the product he was pitching, some kind of nutritional supplement or something. And, he just talked about it for, the first 30 seconds of the interview and then went on with a normal interview.
Mm-hmm.
That's, there's a very, very famous one among Mets fans where Matt Harvey, I don't remember which Matt Harvey controversy this was, but there was some Matt Harvey controversy going on at a time when Matt Harvey also had a PR deal with Qualcomm, the phone company. And he went on some national radio show and they started asking him and he said, oh, I'm really just here to talk about Qualcomm. And, there's a difference between those two different types of interviews. I don't anticipate that's going to be a big deal. You might see, depending on how this is all written up, maybe someone comes to the podium wearing an Elk and Elk t-shirt or something, if they're an Elk and Elk sponsor. Or Reichert or Huntington Bank or whatever institution you'd like to have them pitch. But yeah, there's still so many questions that are open as far as like what is this actually going to look like, and how, who can and can't have a kid sponsor them, all that kind of stuff. That don't run, don't race out too fast to pat the NCAA in the back. They haven't actually done this yet.
And one of the things and Gene Smith was part of the board there, along with OSU president Michael Drake. But one of the things Gene said was there's no cap on this, but there will be guide rails. And, no cap. It's going to be, they'll let the market determine things. But initially, who knows what this market is going to look like. And it's going to take a little bit of time for things to settle down. But what it does bring is transparency. And the amount of work that somebody is going to have to take on in the NCAA, with each university, in dealing with all of these deals. I don't know. Tom, how many players on Ohio State's team right now do you think would it be worth somebody is everybody worth something, or are we talking 35 of the 85 guys?
Well, it sort of depends on what we're talking about here. Is it
right?
Having a TV ad for a car dealership? Yeah, it's probably a relatively small number of guys who would kind of move the needle there. If it's players being able to do autograph signings at the collectibles store in the mall, the thing that every single Ohio State player for probably 30 years has done 5 minutes after their eligibility is up, them being able to do that potentially while they're in the middle of their career and while they're a little bit more front of mind and they might have more value. That's something that you could see just about everyone on the team, every scholarship player potentially doing that at some point. And maybe, what are you getting paid? $5 an autograph, something like that. Guys may make just a few $100 off that if they're, the third team offensive tackle or whatever. But if you're a starter, if you were let's just use an older example. Like if you're Pepe Pearson now, if he went and did an autograph signing in a mall, probably would not have a particularly long line. If Pepe Pearson was doing an autograph signing in a mall in 1997, when he was the starting running back and his jersey was the one that they were selling in the bookstores and all of that, then he probably has a pretty long line because he's a pretty big name. Like that's the kind of kid that, you're not necessarily going to be an NFL superstar. But that's the kind of kid that could really maximize his value during the time that he's actually in school. So it just kind of depends on what they end up opening up and exactly what those guardrails are that they're talking about.
For your Pepe Pearson example, I would suggest he do it in 1996 when he had Orlando Pace, because his 1997 was not as good, and you could argue that Michael Wiley at that point was the better running back. That's just my opinion. I only base that on facts. But the transparency of this all goes through an Ohio State office, through a university office, and it goes through the NCAA, and every deal is known. So then you'll see the bigger deals, which some players will have. Justin Fields will have a bigger deal than Blake Haubeil, But along with the autograph signings, I could see every player having a social media deal or deals because everybody has followings. Like Justin Fields, I looked it up, has 391,000 followers on Instagram and 130,000 on Twitter. So there's quite a bit of an opportunity for money to be made there that the average college football fan isn't going to see. So it shouldn't affect them and how they think of the amateur status of these players. I go ahead and tell me what I should buy on Instagram. I'm not going to see it because I don't do the Instagram much. But, and I've never really been, even going back to being a Bulls fan growing up in the 90s, I didn't really care about endorsements. That never really swayed me. Did it matter that I couldn't afford Nikes? Probably, probably there's some of that. But I think when we talk about the guide rails, and I don't know, and maybe in group text message time I mentioned it's like the old ropes on the sidewalks on High Street to keep the drunks on the sidewalk. And as long as you just stay on that sidewalk, stay in those ropes, you can go as high as you want, as far as you want down High Street, no cap. It's when you start getting outside of these lines that you might get hit by a car or a cop sees you and busts you. And that's when we start seeing these big spikes one way or the other in terms of, I think Gene Smith mentioned, $50,000 for a couple of likes. That's probably not what this is for, and that's gonna raise some red flags. And really, it's the whole booster involvement that is still the biggest concern for the schools. And it will always be that way because boosters and, frankly, schools are always looking for a way to take advantage of the rules. Schools are looking for a way to take advantage of the rules. Boosters are looking for a way to take advantage of anything. And now you've got this kind of situation. So, yeah, schools are going to be concerned, and rightfully so. They say boosters can't be involved in the recruitment of players or the enticement still. But once they get on campus, you can make a promise to a recruit, like behind the scenes, and then sign them to a deal as a freshman. How do you, how do you keep that? How do you police that other than letting the market sort it out? And I assume as boosters continue to maybe whiff on some guys, they'll stop sponsoring them. I don't know, but the monitoring of these things, I think, is a blessing, but there's still going to be. It's right that the schools are still concerned about boosters because they should be.
Well, you have all sorts of gray areas there with boosters, and they will probably get a little more black and white when the NCAA actually figures out what the rules are. But you're still going to have people looking for an advantage. I mean, whatever restrictions they put on this, as soon as they put the restrictions on this, people are either going to be looking for loopholes or actively just circumventing the rules. That is how college sports has been for more than 100 years, and that is how college sports will probably be, because as long as you are putting restrictions on it, there is a competitive advantage to be gained by going outside of those restrictions. So I think in a lot of ways, some of the current recruiting rules and compensation rules are a little bit of eyewash of, the purity of amateurism, and you don't have to look that hard in a whole lot of places around the country to go, okay, this probably isn't really how it works. Gene Smith's example about $50,000 for a couple of social media likes, that's probably a little bit out of beyond what people could realistically expect to receive. But like Trevor Lawrence, for example, there was an article I read, I think it was by Pete Thamel. He talked to someone about what Trevor Lawrence could expect to receive for like social media posts, just to be a social media influencer. He has 500,000 Instagram followers, 81,000 Twitter followers. And the guy said he could make $16,000 for an Instagram post and $1,100 for a Twitter post. And then, he was estimating, 12 local businesses might be interested and like 50 total posts. So Trevor Lawrence could make, maybe $500,000, $1 million just from that stuff, and not having to, go stand in front of, go stand with the guy from Reichert, or go stand with the Elk and Elk guys or whatever. Just do it that way. Not have to sit in a mall and sign autographs for 5 hours on a Saturday afternoon. So you're talking about potentially a lot of money at the top end of the scale, but based on the NCAA's track record of enforcement and actually being able to follow through and ensure compliance, any rules and restrictions that they put on there, it seems like people are going to probably find a way to circumvent that, and it'll maybe kind of work, but kind of not.
It is crazy what influencers can make, and that's something that people never had to deal with before. It was never an option before, and now it would be so. You mentioned the 5 hours at the mall or whatever. Yeah, I'm not interested in doing that if I can just send out a couple of Instagram posts and now my day is done and I can get back to studying my playbook. There's all kinds of little rules in here where I believe you can say, like, I'm Justin Fields from Ohio State, but there can be no logos, there can be no intellectual property from the university. They have to keep things separate because it is so important that the player and the university are separate, because they don't want the players ever to be considered employees, which is another reason why there will be no video game initially, no NCAA football, because there is no collective bargaining group of players like there is the NFLPA and all the other players associations, which allow games to use their names and likenesses. And if you do that for college football, now you've kind of given them a union, and the NCAA also doesn't want that. So there's maybe some workarounds down the road, but Tom, you and I have talked about this. There doesn't need to be anything accurate about the teams that EA Sports would put out there. Just put the schools' names, make them editable, and we'll take care of the rest. I don't need Justin Fields in a video game. I can have somebody put him in there, or I can put him in there. There's no reason. I don't understand the reason why we can't have an NCAA football game without. You don't need to make the rosters even remotely accurate. Now, they went crazy initially when they would even get like the home states correct on some of the players, or on most of the players, even though here and there you'd have a white player that was black and a black player that was white and things like that. But they really went overboard initially, and they kind of maybe deserved to be smacked on the wrist. They didn't. We all didn't deserve to lose this, but I think they can bring it back. They don't have to. They don't have to involve the players, basically. And you see the players on Twitter and on social media saying, just please bring it back. We want it back. I want to be in the game. I want it. I want the game. I would pay $100 for the game. I would pay $100 to be put in the game. It's something that everybody wants back. And I don't understand why EA and the NCAA are just like, nah, we're not going to do it.
That was another thing that we talked about, I think, on a group text at some point this week. And my assumption is that there must be some legal reason that, based on how obvious they made it earlier, that there's some legal reason that that's not a viable option now. That it can't, that because they spent so many years just kind of forcing their way through that plausible deniability loophole, that now it's, making an editable game now, it won't work, and it won't. Because otherwise they could have just done that immediately the year after the Ed O'Bannon lawsuit shut it down. It seems like that would have been a very obvious loophole for them to go through. And so that was a profitable enough game that if that was a viable strategy legally, it seems like they almost certainly would have done that. What I would be interested in them looking at is, okay, can you just do this on an individual basis? Now, there's a lot of people you'd have to do this with, but can you go to the 130 FBS teams, and can you give the 85 or however many players on that roster that you want to include in the game? We will give you a copy of this game in exchange for your likeness, name, and attributes. And I cannot imagine that there would be more than 2 or maybe 1% of players would feel that was insufficient for them. And if Trevor Lawrence is making $1 million off of his Instagram and his Twitter account. Is Trevor Lawrence really going to be the one that hangs it up and is like, no, I don't want that. Especially if he's got a whole, a locker room of 83 other guys in his locker room with him who really want to do this game and who, just want to do it for their copy of the game. I don't, I can't imagine that getting hung up for that reason. And then, you just, if Trevor Lawrence doesn't want to do it, you just make the game without Trevor Lawrence, or you just make a generic quarterback, or you make the backup quarterback behind him better, and he just doesn't exist in this universe. I mean, that's it would obviously be easier with a collective bargaining. Do it with cut a deal with the College Football Players Association, and just do it that way. This would obviously be a lot more legwork, and maybe it's not viable for that reason. But I mean, you're talking about 130 teams times 85 players. You're a little north of 10,000 copies of the game. I can't imagine that their cost per unit there is that high. So even if you say it's $5 per unit, you're talking maybe 50 grand, 60 grand, something like that to license the game. I can't imagine that would be that, that would keep them from doing it. So I don't know. It seems like there should be a viable workaround, even if there is not a collectively bargained college football players union, which the NCAA, is going to go kicking and screaming into the night that they can't possibly do that.
And really, by the time this all gets situated, the offices at each of the universities will be able to get this request from EA, say they do it, and have all of the players fill it out. And, it would be pretty streamlined, even though you are talking, that many people, but eventually the offices will be able to handle that. But if Trevor Lawrence, even though he'll be gone, would be like, no, I don't want to sign it, then I guess you would have like at Clemson, you have like QB Eagles or QB Brown instead. But I would like, if you do a QB Eagles or something like that, still give them the long hair, just long hair out the back. And, wow, look at QB Eagles throw the ball. And, I see. Initially, I didn't think that was. I didn't think going to all of the players would be viable because of the amount of money. But I do agree with you thinking about it. Like just a free copy of the game should be plenty of compensation, because it's what they want. It's what we all want. It's what people want, and you don't have to hold everybody over a fire. Not everything has to be like, I want more. It's a freaking video game, with your likeness. And like you said, if you just go tweet about it, and then you'll get money for the tweet, but everybody wants to be in the game. Players have been ticked for the last 6-7 years that they haven't been able to be in the game, and everybody wants it back. And it's a small price to pay to just say, yeah, go ahead and use my likeness, because I've dreamt of having my name in this game. So yes, but maybe down the road, I eventually think we will have it, because it was so popular and it was so iconic. Tom, it was interesting that once this announcement came down, Ohio State was already tweeting about it, like already basically putting out graphics saying, hey, recruits, we've got all of these businesses in Columbus. We're ready. And this was something that Gene Smith said back in October. Like, they will have companies lined up and ready to go, like essentially almost organizing this. And Ohio State wasted no time. I saw a tweet from Travion Henderson with quote tweeting the Bleacher Report article saying, hey, this is happening. And his exact quote was, OMGGG. So when you've got 3 G's in there, you're pretty excited. And so this is recruits. It's something else for them to think about for sure. And as we know, like, Ohio State is super prepared, and they're going to hit this hard. It's so, I can't get over like how much work and just the the areas that you have to be incorporated in, and just like dealing with it and ready for. And Mark Pantoni and his staff are amazing that they are ready for all of this, and they hit the ground running when it happens. And Ohio State will be, once this is full go, they'll have a plan in place that is better than anybody else's. Which takes me to the fact that if every school, not every school, if everybody can get paid, like if everybody can make money, then it kind of evens the playing field. And then so you maybe make decisions on what else you can get and what else a university will do for you. And I think that's where Ohio State has another advantage, because they have this all-encompassing idea for you. And more schools are coming up with the branding, and now they definitely will. But this is something that Ohio State has been doing. And they've been creating this approach for the player from the time you arrive to the time you leave, and then well beyond when you're gone. And so they'll take advantage of this. They'll put it to its best use. They'll maximize it. And I think it just becomes another recruiting tool, a recruiting win, another reason players will choose Ohio State, because there are so many opportunities. We've got Easton, we've got Polaris, we've got Tuttle. That's 3 malls in this town where people can go to get their autographs. But there's a lot of opportunity here. It is a pretty big city. I saw one of the tweets from OSU, the 5th best city in the world. And I don't know who decides that. But I guess, Tom, if you're going to be cooped up in a city, Columbus isn't that bad to be cooped up in. And Ohio State is going to take advantage of this, and not like a booster takes advantage of stuff. They're going to put this to very good use.
Well, you have the opportunity to make this an extension of the Real Life Wednesdays program. I mean, they're already working on developing kind of the whole person and making them better, more well-rounded people. This is a great way to teach financial responsibility. Like, all of a sudden, you may not have come from money, but all of a sudden you've got some money. And whether that's, $500 or $5,000 or $50,000 or $500,000, like, this is your opportunity to learn how to manage money and how to budget. And hey, buying a $50,000 car might be a stupid investment, actually, when you're 18. Here's why. And, maybe teach them a little about investing. And even if you're not a business major, it might not be terrible to understand, like, how the stock market works. And here's some different investment vehicles. And, have people who can help them manage the money. And, not that they're, licensed financial advisors in the program that are specifically managing these people's money for them, but just like, here's some advice. Consider, instead of buying a Maserati, consider, how about you put some of that money away on the side and save it? Because you never know. You might, everyone thinks they're going to be a first-round draft pick in 3 years. Some of you probably, statistically, will not be first-round draft picks. Some of you might not play at all. So it would be great to have some of this money socked away for a rainy day in the future. That's all stuff that would be, really improve their experience as students, as players, just as people overall. I mean, those are valuable lessons that you can learn when you're managing $50,000, so that then when you sign a contract for $5 million, you don't blow it all immediately in your first couple of years and end up broke. I mean, you hear about NFL players just blowing through their first contracts, and then they don't get a second, and then they're broke 5 years later. Like, that shouldn't happen. So help teach people to manage that money now when you're working with a smaller amount, and then that sets you up to be successful when you're getting paid a bigger amount.
There are some recommended areas of regulation, and one of them was shoe and apparel companies, and the reason was, quote, due to their history of encouraging or facilitating recruiting and other rules infractions. But I wonder if it has more to do with, we're a Nike school, we don't want Justin Fields to endorse Adidas. And I seem to recall initially that they weren't going to allow this back in when we talked to Gene Smith, I think in October, where initially the rules were like if they can't have competing deals with the school. And again, how do you stop that from happening if it's a market, it's a free market system and there's, you're not putting any, there are restrictions. They don't want you like, I'm Justin Fields from Marlboro. I'm Drew Chrisman for Jack Daniels. They don't want that, and that won't be something you see. But to paint it as, well, Nike is crooked and Reebok is crooked, so we don't really want players involved with that. That's, you mentioned a quote that you wanted to throw in. I mean, that's up there with Come on.
Yeah, Nike is crooked. We cannot have their stain on our program. Please ignore the Nike swoosh on literally every piece of apparel that anyone in our athletic department is wearing. And okay, we all see what's going on here. The single greatest quote. This is Dan Wolkin tweeted this out. His tweet reads, "Mark Emmert with an all-timer. Mark Emmert is the NCAA president and constant object of my scorn." The quote was, "Our efforts over the years to improve the student-athlete experience have often been met with increased litigation and challenges that significantly limit the NCAA's ability to address those needs and opportunities." There have been, trillions and trillions of words spoken this year. There might not be a more untrue group of words spoken in the year 2020 than that one right there. That is just the absolutely staggering gall to suggest that, well, we would have done this sooner, but some people tried to go through legislative or the litigation route. Bull crap. My goodness, that is just, he is one of the most reprehensible pieces of crap on earth. The NCAA has not done anything to benefit student athletes without getting dragged kicking and screaming to it in a generation. They don't do anything without being absolutely forced to, pulled by the absolute scruff of their neck, and then right at the time when it looks like they're going to be forced to, we're going to, okay, guys, whoa, slow down. I don't know why you're suing us. We were definitely just about to do this. Bull crap. He is just beneath contempt. I can't stand Mark Emmert. And if you go back and look at, pick whatever change of rules there has been in the previous few years, and then go back at what the NCAA was saying about that change of rules 2 years prior to that. And every single one of them was going to be the death of amateurism and the death of the purity of college sports. And then they do it and it's like, turns out that's fine. Okay. Well, but the next one is going to be the death of college sports. And somehow it never ends up killing college sports. And somehow the money brought in by these TV contracts that are like 1,000 times bigger than they were 30 years ago, that has not impacted the purity of college sports at all. But that may be related to the fact the NCAA gets cut. I don't know. I mean, it's who's to say? It could be literally anything. It could be the fact that the NCAA gets a cut of that money, or it could be I don't know actually. It might just be that.
Was it a couple of years ago where you had an NCAA athlete put it out on social media how he goes to bed hungry every night, and then the NCAA is finally like, "Fine, we'll let you have food." And so now that even walk-ons get to eat. And wow, you are so gracious to allow people to eat.
It is literally, it's like the more gruel scene from Oliver Twist and Mark Emmert. More? Come on. Like, you cannot pretend this is the 1950s and it's amateurism because no one's making money. Well, okay, everyone sees your TV contracts now, and everyone sees that they're paying. All of a sudden, we're paying, $180 to go to an Ohio State football game instead of $35. Like, turns out there's more money, and Some of that is going to, some of that is going to help fund the non-rev sports, and that's awesome, and that's cool, and that should provide opportunities. But also, the NCAA's headquarters is pretty nice for a place that doesn't seem to want anyone to have money. So, and Mark Emmert, I think he makes $4 million a year, if I'm remembering that right. I have angrily tweeted that number out at some point in the past. I think it was about $4 million a year. Like, if we want to talk about the purity of amateurism, like, that's fine, but you'd better not be making seven figures if you're talking about the evils of money and all of that.
I did like when Gene Smith mentioned, players have to be careful because if they make too much, they won't be eligible for their Pell Grants. So yes, Justin Fields, if you careful, if you make $500,000, you're not going to be eligible for that $5,000 Pell Grant. So do you really want this much money if you can't get this much free money over here?
There's a valid point there that they do need to make sure people are educated about the opportunities, and there's going to be some trade-offs, and that is an absolutely valid point. And I think Ohio State's going to do a great job with managing this. There are probably some schools where that won't necessarily be the case. There are probably some schools that don't have their version of Real Life Wednesdays, and you'll have people kind of stepping in bear traps with that. But most of the places where you're going to be making enough money to have it be an issue is just, are not places that, are places that are going to be able to have the staff there to educate you and make sure everyone understands, in the same way you need to manage your money well. Here are the pros and cons to doing this right now, and where these supply and demand curves meet, and all of those fun little things that you have to learn about.
Before you said step in a bear trap, I was imagining what the Real Life Wednesday is at Tennessee, and I was imagining like fashioning a coonskin cap, and then you mentioned step in a bear trap, and I would think maybe that would be week 2. Like, hey guys, this is a bear trap. This is what it's like to step in it. Don't do this. Like an actual bear trap.
Yes, consider not doing this because it will hurt.
Here we go. Oh my God. That would be great to watch. So one thing before we wrap up that I don't like is when we see all of the stuff that has been opened up and then people get hung up on the regulations, and they're like, oh yeah, you're keeping stuff from the players. And it's like, well, I mean, everything is regulated. Let's appreciate the fact that now guys, I mean, if Trevor Lawrence can send out 16 Instagram posts and make $500,000, that's pretty good. And we should be appreciative that is now available to players. Now, it's not available to all the players because not everybody is Trevor Lawrence. And that's life. We've all dealt with that. None of us is Trevor Lawrence. Okay. But, this is just another aspect of it. It's an opportunity for players to get the most out of their time in college. And, so the NCAA is still trying to keep them from this and this and this. The NCAA is going to try to keep them from some things, but there's also so much has been given to them, assuming this all happens. So I think let's appreciate that as well. There. Yeah. As long as this happens, it's good.
Yeah, and I mean, this is again probably me being cynical, but that's just from me actually paying attention to the NCAA over the years. And I mean, Jeremy Bloom. Do you remember Jeremy Bloom? He was a football player at Colorado who was also an Olympic skier, and the NCAA made him not have his I think he lost his football eligibility because he had taken endorsement money for skiing or something like that. He was interviewed for something recently, and he basically said, it's great that they're saying all this right now. The NCAA is extremely good at saying something and then kind of like quietly walking it back later. And it's like you get the initial blast of good publicity and look at all the things we're doing. And then, you quietly kind of dial it back later, and it doesn't end up being nearly as impactful or meaningful as the initial reading of it might have suggested it would be. So just it's good. It is a step. It is a promising step in the right direction. It is ludicrous that it took this long for it to get to this point. And as soon as we actually see this in action, then absolutely feel free to give the NCAA credit. But the NCAA's history on all sorts of issues like this suggests that you should not rush out to immediately give them credit until you actually see the final version of this.
So what you're saying is when they say no cap, they might mean yes cap.
I mean,
when we said no cap.
Yeah, we're not saying we definitely are not putting a cap on it. There's like a ceiling, but not a cap. So it's just worth worth getting the details on this because I think there are definitely people with their hearts in the right place. Gene Smith and Michael Drake have been kind of on the forefront of this, and they deserve a lot of credit for that because I think they genuinely are interested in kind of doing right by the student athletes and treating them, letting them have what they can get, and that they deserve a lot of credit. The NCAA as a general institution, I will believe it when I see it, and this is certainly encouraging, certainly a small step in the right direction. Let's see what it actually ends up being.
Well said. So I think we should go ahead and start to wrap up here. Tom, what day is today? Is this Thursday? Yes.
Yes.
So ESPN tonight is showing Ohio State, Michigan from 2016, which proves that ESPN also listens to this show because we've already done that. We've already done the watch along of that game. But this is a 4-hour block of time that ESPN is devoting to this. So with like a 20-minute pregame, Urban Meyer's going to be involved. JT Barrett's going to stop by at some point. So just a heads up if you're into that sort of thing. That game went, what was it, 2 overtimes, Tom? Is that right? 2 overtimes for that one. And Ohio State did win? They did win that one.
It was a Michigan game, so yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, they won.
That's right. So if y'all are interested, go ahead and catch that. Thank you all for listening. Make sure to check out theozone.net where we've got stuff going for you. There's still football going on. Also, I have joined Subtext, which is a service that allows you to text back and forth with me. If you want to sign up, you can go to joinsubtext.com/Tony Gerdeman. I'm there. Feel free to sign up if you want. Tom, anything else after I just did a plug for myself?
I will say, as someone who texts with Gerd on a fairly frequent basis, it is often worth it. So you should consider it. He'll probably give you, good stuff that he can't reveal publicly if you sign up. But you have to sign up. It's just like how we have all our best content in our Patreon shows for the podcast. Got to sign up for Patreon to get the real, here's what we really think. Like we always often hold back our opinions on this show. On the Patreon shows, we just let it fly. I'll let you know what I really think of Mark Emmert on the Patreon show.
Thank you for reading that. But yeah, if you want to support us over at Patreon, it's patreon.com/Buckeye Weekly, where we've already had our monthly show, correct? Yes, we did. So we're okay there. But all of our shows are ad-free there, so you don't have to sit through commercials. And then we give you a bonus show a month. Unless stuff is happening, then it's more frequently than that. So, but thank you all for listening. We will have a recruiting show coming up in the next day or two as we discuss Ohio State possibly putting together the greatest recruiting class in the history of the world. So thank you all for listening and look forward to that. History of the world.
threw away the motel key. I wish it never